Hello friends, have you noticed how quickly the atmosphere of a board meeting can change? One moment people are exploring ideas and building on one another's thinking and the conversation feels open. And then somebody asks a difficult question and the room becomes quieter and evidence is now being scrutinized and assumptions are being challenged. The discussion feels more serious. A little later, the board begins talking about the school's future, and the energy shifts again and people start imagining possibilities. The conversation opens up once more. Same people, same meeting, but a completely different way of thinking together. Experienced board members often recognize these shifts instinctively. They've seen enough meetings to know that governance doesn't feel the same all the time, and it certainly shouldn't. But for someone new to governance, those changes can sometimes be difficult to interpret. A conversation suddenly becomes more challenging. People interrupt one another. The chair asks sharper questions. A trustee disagrees openly. If you've never experienced that before, it's easy to wonder whether something has gone wrong or, has someone become defensive? Is there a tension in the room and, what happened? Have I said something inappropriate? Sometimes relationships do become a bit strained in board meetings, but often nothing has gone wrong at all. It's just that the board has simply moved into a different mode of governance. When we don't understand these shifts, we often explain them through personalities. But when we do understand them, we begin explaining them through the work, the nature of the work itself. And recognizing that changes the conversation entirely. Different kinds of governance require different kinds of thinking. Reviewing the school's financial position requires one kind of attention. The board needs clarity, confidence in the information, permission to ask difficult questions. That's their job. A few minutes later, the board may be discussing safeguarding. Now the emphasis changes. Different questions become important. Different responsibilities come into focus. And then later still in the meeting, there's a conversation that relates to the future of the campus. And now the board is thinking years ahead, exploring possibilities, balancing ambition against reality. Nothing unusual has happened. Different agenda items simply require different ways of thinking together. The governance profiles help make those shifts visible. They're not profiles of individual people, they're profiles of collective thinking. Each one describes a different mode of governance that naturally emerges as the work changes. They give the board a shared language for something that it's experienced many times, but perhaps never had a way to describe. And that matters. When we can name what's happening, we spend less energy trying to interpret one another and more energy focusing on the work itself. Each profile is paired with a governance lens. The profile is a simple summary. The lens takes that idea further. It contains a carefully chosen set of questions that help the board to think more deliberately in that particular mode. Not because every meeting should follow the same pattern, quite the opposite. The lens helps the board lean into the type of thinking the conversation needs at that moment. Sometimes that means exploring, sometimes analyzing, sometimes challenging assumptions, sometimes stepping back to see the bigger picture. The questions don't tell the board what to think, they help the board think more effectively together. Over time, boards become better at recognizing these transitions for themselves. And someone might say, I think we've moved into analyzing this now, or we've challenged the proposal thoroughly. Is it time to explore some alternatives? Or maybe we're still thinking about today's problem. What would this look like if we lifted our eyes 5 years ahead? These aren't procedural comments, they're actually moments of collective awareness, and the board is no longer being carried by the conversation, it's beginning to actually navigate it. And that's one of the hidden benefits of the profiles. They create permission. Permission to challenge. Permission to explore. Permission to disagree. Permission to imagine, because people understand that the conversation has changed, not the personal relationships. A robust challenge doesn't automatically feel like conflict. An exploratory discussion doesn't feel unfocused. A strategic conversation doesn't feel unrealistic. The board recognizes that each mode has its own purpose. The governance profiles don't tell a board what to think or which mode is better. They simply help the board recognize how it's thinking together, whether that way of thinking matches the work in front of them, and when it might be time to shift. The strongest boards aren't the ones that stay in one mode, they're the ones that know how to move deliberately between them.